And that's why our whole context matters is so important
Mhm.
to me, because the context changes a ton of the answers. And a lot of the context is what I call tiny context. It's not the big context of, are you a service provider or a product provider? Okay. That's
Mhm.
like giant context, right? If you're doing an online service business versus selling, a physical product, those are giant changes in context. And most everyone could see how advice might need to be different for those two businesses.
Are you feeling overwhelmed, stuck, or uncertain about how to grow your business without sacrificing what really matters most? Welcome to The Business You Really Want, the show for women ready to build a sustainable, fully aligned business. Aligned with what, you ask? You, your values, your life. Seriously, it is possible. I'm Tonya Kubo, and along with business advisor extraordinaire Gwen Bortner, we're here to show you how. Have you ever felt like you're doing everything right in your business? You're following the expert advice, you're implementing all the recommended strategies. You're the A++ student, but you're still not seeing the results you want. Well, today on The Business You Really Want, we are going to talk about why following someone else's blueprint might actually be what's holding you back. This is true. Being the A++ student may not be in your best interests. I'm Tonya Kubo, joined today by business advisor extraordinaire Gwen Bortner. And today we are tackling a challenge that I think affects every entrepreneur at some point, which is what happens when you're doing all the, and I'm going to do the air quotes thing, right things, but they just aren't working for you. Now, Gwen, I think this is something that came up when we first met, when we first started having business coffee together. So I know you've seen the pattern countless times. I know you've seen it with clients. They come to you frustrated when they have tried everything experts have recommended and still find themselves struggling. I'm curious about what you're observing right now.
So right now, one of the conversations I've had with a number of people in, variety of conversations where it's popped up is one of the, I'll say historically pieces of knowledge that everyone says is you need to do a program and it should be a year. Just plan on a year-long program. A year-long program is the way to go. And there are some really positive reasons to do a year-long program because that means you've now figured out what your income is going to be for a year. And, there are really positive reasons to do it. However, this is one of the things that a lot of people are no longer wanting to sign up for a couple reasons. One is I've committed to the year-long program. I'm 4 months in. It is not delivering at all what I want, and I can't get out. So now I've committed, right? So that's a big problem. Sometimes it is, I don't actually understand why it's going to take a full year. Why do I need to be committed for a year to do this thing, whatever it is? And they've realized that the year is not for them. The year is for the provider. It's not actually for the customer. Right? It's to guarantee the provider's income and to make sure that they've got their cash flow as opposed to it's what you need as a customer. Right. And so they're finding a lot of times it's like, no, it's doing what I want, but at 6 months I was done. I got what I needed out of it. So kind of the opposite side of it. Why am I still in the program? Right. And so there, there's various and there's been enough of that conversation now outside of people's heads that people are like, oh, that happened to me too. Oh, that happened to me too. Oh, that happened to me too. And so now folks are pushing against it. And a number of folks have said, yeah, I'm going to do a program. It's going to be a year long. And the first question I ask is, does it need to be a year long? Right. And often they look at me and like, what do you mean? And it's like, I'm seeing people who have year-long programs, their signups are dropping drastically. Now, there's another reason to do it on the provider side as well. And that is you don't know if your people are staying for a full year. You may assume that you're going to get some amount of re-signups, but because they're actually disappointed so much earlier, you could have fixed it, but you didn't know to fix it because there was no real check and balance. And so it comes to the end of the year and it's like, oh yeah, I'm expecting a 30% renewal. I'm making up a number. I have no idea
Right.
what but and then they get there and it's like, oh, I only had a 5% renewal. Now I don't know what to do. Right? Because I was counting on that. So year-long program. That's just one right off the top of my head.
Okay, so let's break that down because that's a great example. But of course, as always, I could do a whole episode on just that. So, and we're not going
This is what we do, and luckily we've got a lot more episodes ahead of us.
Yeah, well, I was like, this is what I love about the fact that we do this every week. Because I like this partially because of where I'm at in business right now, because I am seeing the same thing you are. I would have framed it differently because, what I'm seeing, and part of it is my stage of life, right? I still have school-age kids. And, it's like, I don't know what I'm going to be doing in 6 months. I don't know what life's going to look like in 6 months. So I can't, honestly, Gwen, there's a trip I take every July. It is the same weekend every single July. I've been taking this trip since 2019. And I haven't bought my plane ticket because I'm like, I don't know what July is going to look like. That's just the status of life at this point. So you've got that argument against a 12-month purchase. But I do think a lot of people go, even if they trust you as a provider to deliver 12 months of great value, they go, I know me. I get really excited. And then at about the 3-month mark, life gets in the way and I tap out. I don't want to be stuck paying for this if I'm not going to be using it. So there's a million and one reasons why people are hesitant to invest in the year-long program that has absolutely nothing to do with the price point of a year-long program. That's the point I wanted to make because I think a lot of people go, well, yeah, those year-long programs are $10,000, $20,000, $50,000. That's why people aren't buying. I don't think that. I think to your point, it's the time commitment. And it's also, if I'm looking to solve a problem that feels acute right now, do I really want to wait 12 months for the solution?
Well, right. And back to that is one of the issues is, do you actually need all of this time to make it really be the way that it needs to be? Or is what you actually have is a 3-month program and you'd like to have them stay in for an additional 9 months to, support and shore up their behaviors, their habits, their, whatever the case may be. And that's one of the things that I talk with some clients about is I say, well, let's make it a 3-month program and then let's have a follow-on offer that's a month-to-month offer that's, a version of support, for lack of a better description, depending on what it is.
Yeah. So we can use the example of the 12-month program or we can move on from there. But, when I think about bad business advice, right? Because that's our topic. What is the hidden cost of following bad business advice? Because I think sometimes I could be just speaking for myself here, but I happen to not think I'm that unique. There are times that I go, well, worst case scenario, I'm out X amount of dollars. I'm out X amount of time. But I've been around this particular block long enough to know that there are other costs that I oftentimes don't see until I'm on the other side and I grow really resentful of them, right? And the biggest cost is it's not the time and money specifically, but it's what I could have been doing with the time and the money that would have gotten me closer to the goal instead.
For sure. It's anything that you say yes to means there's something somewhere that you're saying no to. Now, it doesn't mean that the thing that you're saying no to is actually a better thing. So,
Right.
Sometimes the thing you're saying yes to is the right thing. But as soon as you say yes to it, you can't say yes to something else with that same money and with that same time. And I think this is my very, as you call it, my tiny T trauma around a lot of marketing that I see. And that is that there's these giant promises that are given. And these giant promises are given and they are well done. The marketing and the sales process both are top notch. And you really believe that first, it's what you want, it's what you need, and it's going to provide the answer. You really, truly believe all of those things. And then as you get into it, it's like, that's not going to do it for
Mhm.
what I need based on my business. Yay, yay, yay. We get to say it again. Context matters, right? Oh, yeah, we both
I
worked on
planned ahead on that one with my coffee mug.
Yeah, nice. So, but really that becomes the issue. I don't want to say that they're out to deceive you, even though it often feels that way in the moment. Like
Mhm.
I can tell you every time in my mind is like, they did that on purpose.
Right.
Even though I know most of them aren't actually that devious to actually try and
Mhm.
do that on purpose. They actually believe
Mhm.
that whatever they're selling really is the end all be all,
Mhm.
answer for whatever the problem is. But it is an answer, usually a single
Mhm.
answer, which doesn't have enough flexibility to deal with everyone else's context. And so there will be some people, which will also be very frustrating because there'll be at least one or two people who are like, oh my gosh, it's made all the difference in the world
Yeah.
for me. And you're like, I must be an idiot. I must be the dumbest person on the
Mhm.
planet because I cannot make this work for me. I mean, if it sounds like this is the voice of experience, it is the voice of experience because that
Yep.
is exactly the way that I have felt when
Yep.
I've been in this. It's like, why are these people like so excited? I can't, this is not working for me at all.
Mhm.
And I know I'm doing the work and generally I know I'm not stupid. Back to, typically these are women who have been A++ students.
Yep.
Right? It's like
Yeah.
I'm doing the work, I'm doing the thing, and I'm not getting the grade,
Mhm.
continuing
Right.
with the metaphor. And it's like, no, it's not gonna work for me because of some aspect of my business, my
Mhm.
business model, my list size, my approach, my personality. I mean, there's all sorts
Mhm.
of things
Yep.
in that can play in that make it not work. And so it becomes bad advice
Mhm.
because it's given as the answer when it's a answer.
Yes. And I have this, I mean, good golly, my business career is littered with corpses of things that some expert told me should have panned out that didn't. Uh, and I think of, like another common one, and I'll just use a marketing one, right? Is like market research, right? Like,
Mhm.
there's a lot of people who teach you to pre-sell an offer, which I 100% support, right? Do not create things that you do not have a validated market for. Yes, that is good advice. But they'll tell you to start with market research to come up with the concept that you pre-sell. And I have an audience that knows what they should want, but
Yeah.
very commonly is out of touch with what they really want. So they will tell me all sorts of things. I have done every kind of survey you can imagine. I have hired people to help me with research question design. And these results are always very similar. And every time I have created those products, I have had a whopping 0 sales. Not 1, not 2, 0.
Mhm.
And it's because, once I started having one-to-one conversations and really deep conversations with my people, I realized it's like, oh, they are so immersed in guru advice that they have been conditioned to believe they want those things. But when it comes to laying dollars on the line, they really don't.
Right.
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 And it's one of those things where when I worked at a university, that kind of market research, surveying and focus groups and all of that was highly effective at figuring out admissions campaigns and stuff. It just, my particular type of service provider business and the people I attract did not work. Gwen, I think what we're really talking about is that a lot of people teach from their own perspective. They teach from their own
Absolutely.
experience, right? And it's not intentional. They're not trying to cheat anybody, but they are selling a one size fits all solution. Like, can I just go so far as to say that? They are selling a one size fits all
Absolutely.
solution and they're selling it to as many people as possible. And there is always going to be a percentage of A++ students that you said who do all the homework, who show up for all the things and do exactly as they're told that are going to fail. Can you tell us a little bit more about why that is?
Well, the first thing back years ago when I was teaching knitting, One of the things that came up is you do not need to know about knitting to care about these details, but there's actually like 8 different ways to correctly make a knit stitch, which is really pulling one loop through another loop. This is truly not rocket science.
I'm just like, I'm going to believe you right now because.
Right. Yeah, I understand. But there were people who would say the best way to knit is this particular style of knitting, one of these 8 styles of knitting. Okay. And what we realized is what they were really saying was when I discovered this way, it was life-changing for me. It made it so much easier, so much faster, so much, fill in all of the blanks, whatever. And so in their mind, it is the best way.
Because it was the best way for them.
Because it was the best way for them, right? And I think a version of that is what we see a lot in the guru space, is I either took someone else's advice or I took someone else's advice and I added my own thing to it, or I figured something out on my own. It doesn't matter, what the process was. But in their mind, it was like, and it changed everything.
Yeah.
And because it did, I believe that if you do all of these exact same things, it will change everything for you too. Right? Back to, I don't think they actually have malintent. Right? This is actually what's happening in their brain, but they can't separate that. They can't say that it changed it for me, so I think it's going to change it for you. And in many cases, they've experienced some of the other things, but because they failed, they don't see how those could work for somebody else. Right. And so I think that's where the problem lies, right? So they want to put everybody into their particular, box or, hole or however you want to describe it. And it's like, yeah, but I'm round. It's like, I don't care. Square is the right answer.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like, okay, but I'm not filling up the corners. If you think about a round peg and a square hole, or we're shaving off a whole lot of the roundness to force you into the square. Either way, it's not a good fit.
Right.
Whether you don't fill up the corners or whether you're having to shave off parts of of your roundness, right?
Yeah.
Both cases can get you into the square hole, but it's not a good fit.
Yeah.
And they just say in their mind, it's like, but square was so perfect when they kept putting me in round. Round wasn't working. There's no way round is going to work. It's like, no, it could work. And that's why our whole context matters is so important to me, because the context changes a ton of the answers. And a lot of the context is what I call tiny context. It's not the big context of, are you a service provider or a product provider? Okay, that's like giant context, right? If you're doing an online service business versus selling, a physical product, those are giant changes in context. And most everyone could see how advice might need to be different for those two businesses, right? But it's the tiny context. It's the difference between having tiny children, school-aged children, nearly out children, adult children, no children, right? That can be part of the context of the whole answer, which you're like, but it has nothing to do with my business. And it's like, yeah, but it has to do with your life, and your life is part of your business. And so that's where I call, obviously kids is not a tiny context, but yet it is a tiny context.
Right. Well, but it is. And it reminds me of, there was somebody I worked with a couple years ago, and they had taken a program that taught them to write books and sell the books on Amazon. And this was going to be passive income, right? So they're going to take all their knowledge, they're going to put it in books, sell it through Amazon, and the money's going to just come rolling in. And they were on book 5, and the money was not rolling in. And so, I asked the standard marketing question of, okay, well, how are you trying to sell it? Crickets. Because they were taught to put the book on Amazon, use some certain keywords, right? And the money would come rolling in. So they didn't have anything else around it. And then they were going to invest in a funnel program that promised them that it would engineer a funnel so that people would buy the book. So we start talking. I'm talking to them about market research and what is involved in selling a book. Nobody's more passionate about your book than you will be, right? So like, you've got to schlep it out there. And what they kept coming back to is like, you don't understand. I've got 3 kids, special needs. I work full time. I don't have time for another job. If I had time for another job, I'd consult in my field. I wrote these books because I had this knowledge, but I don't have time to work one-to-one with people to give them the knowledge. So I wrote these books. Yep, that's great, but you got to find a way to get the books in front of the people. And this person genuinely did not have the time to spare. Like, I know there's somebody listening going, I could have helped them do that in just an hour a week. And I'm sure could have, right? But they didn't know you then, so that's not an option. But,
and they really might not have an hour.
And that's the other thing, right? Is they really may not have an hour, but this individual had spent so much money already building this like pretty castle that nobody wanted to live in but them. All based on this idea, if I do all the things I'm told to do, I'll get the results I've been promised.
Right.
And so here's where I want to step back, and I want to ask the question on behalf of the listener of what are the signs that we can be looking out for that clue us in to being on the wrong path?
So the first thing that came to me a number of years ago when I first really identified this as an ongoing issue, not just a I'm an idiot issue, but everyone feels like an idiot issue.
I was going to say, we all go through the I'm the idiot issue. I'm the common denominator. I'm the one who keeps buying the products that don't work.
Exactly. And then you have enough conversation and it's like, oh, there's only a few people that actually aren't idiots. Most of us have our idiot moments, right? Which does generally make you feel better because the other people you're hanging with, it's like, oh no, I don't think of them as idiots. So maybe it's not just me. Yay. But the thing that I identified at the time was so often what we're looking to do is solve a complicated problem with a very simple answer.
Okay. So simple solution to a complicated problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's what we're being sold. We've got this complicated problem and we're being sold, and we use the phrase all the time, all you have to do is.
Right.
Right?
All you gotta do.
All you have to do is. We when I lived in IT, that was our first sign when someone's like, all you have to do is this, and it's like, yeah, no, that's not what the IT department's going to have to do for you. We have a lot more that we're going to have to do than that. But we want it to be all you have to do is, right? And they really believe all you have to do is. And so I didn't live your example, but I know what you're talking about with your example. So just going off of that, the person who sold it to them automatically, like part of their context was they understood marketing and really naturally did a whole lot of marketing stuff. And so it never occurred to them that you'd have to tell people to do that because, oh my God, everyone knows you've got to do that. Duh.
Yep.
Right? I mean, like, they would feel like they were talking down to their people, right? By saying that. So this is that whole, expert curse of knowledge, the expert's curse, the curse of knowledge. That was part of the issue. And so they didn't put it in the program. They didn't talk about it. They didn't say that, this is part of what's going to have to happen on the backside. They were just giving the piece that they thought the world needed. But the reality was this is really actually a pretty complicated problem that they were giving a very simple solution for, right? Because it wasn't because they were looking at the hard part was getting it on Amazon and having the right keywords and doing, those things. For them at the time, back to this changed my life, it'll change yours too.
Right.
That was the hard part. So that's the part that they were selling. But they were undoubtedly, and I run across them all the time, people who actually are really good at marketing, whether they know they are or not. They naturally do it. They've got lots of natural instincts. So they don't ever talk about, and this is how you have to market it.
Right.
Because, well, duh, of course you have to market it.
Yeah.
Right. And if you're someone like me who doesn't duh on marketing, then it's like, well, that's a big, giant piece you left out of the equation. And now it's not working for me because you've left this giant black hole that I don't know how to fill. And although you say you've delivered everything that you were going to deliver, which technically you probably did. Right? Using this gal's example, she got the information that she probably needed, but they left this giant black hole, which was the question you asked, right? And she was like, but why would I need to do that? Or how would I do that? Or as you said, if I would have realized I needed to do all of that, I wouldn't have even started this thing. Right? So I think that's really what the issue is that it's a bigger, more complicated problem that we look for a simple solution to.
Okay, so that's the core issue, is we are looking for, and we're being sold, simple solutions to complicated. And I would even say some issues are not complicated, but they are complex. They have multiple parts, multiple facets, right?
Complicated or complex, yes.
Complicated or complex problem, and then we're trying to throw these simple solutions at them. So what do you think could be some signs that we might see that tell us we're on the wrong path?
So the first really is to say, is this a complicated or complex problem? Because if it is, there needs to be some one-on-one, and I'll say consistent one-on-one advice, because this, as soon as it's complicated or complex, the context matter issue starts popping up. And so your context needs to be taken into account, and there's no way to take it into an account if it's a course, because a course is fixed. I'm going to, and I'm talking about like an online course as opposed to
well, I think you're talking about like online pre-recorded, what is that word? I can't even think of it. But anyway, you watch it on your own time. On-demand course.
On demand, yeah, exactly. That is going to pre-answer a preset of questions, not necessarily your unique question, right? And then if they say, oh yeah, but we do Q&A, part of it is also to understand how much time, how many questions do they cover, how many people are showing up, right? We're going to do a 30-minute Q&A every week. Well, that sounds great unless 100 people are showing up. And so you're jockeying to get your question answered among 100 others during that 30 minutes.
Right. Well, it's not even great if there's only 30 people on that call.
Oh, yeah. No, right? That's only great like if you've got 3 or 4 people on the call. And so that becomes, the next issue. How big is the cohort that you're in and amongst and working? How often can you be on those calls? Because you may need more of the call time than you do the course time. And then, of course, there's the other piece of, are you motivated enough to actually do the things that you have to do with it? We didn't actually, we're kind of presuming everyone's being an A++ student and they're doing all of the things, right? But at some point, not getting the results is enough anti-motivation that we also stop doing all of the things. Right. So that's another piece of it. So for me, my answer these days is a course is only a good choice if it is a very narrow problem. Okay. And I'm really only looking to solve the narrow problem. Going back to your example, my narrow problem is I've got all of these ideas. I know they're good for a book. I know how to talk about it, but I don't know how to get it on Amazon so that people can find it in the search, right? If that was the only thing I was trying to solve, that course probably would be a beautiful course.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to change the question up on you because I really like this direction that we're going. So instead of thinking of the signs that you're on the wrong path, it's like, what are some appropriate solutions to common problems? So you just gave us one big one, right? Which is courses are great for very specific problems. Like they are great solutions for very specific, narrowly focused problems.
Yep.
All right. So what's a coaching program good for? What kinds of problems could a coaching, and I'll let you define, because you might want to say, well, a 3-month coaching program or a right?
Yeah.
Group versus one-on-one. But what kind of problems can coaching programs solve?
So the thing is, first, is it truly coaching? Are they only asking you questions and pulling it out of you?
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you actually somewhere need to have the answers,
Right.
right? Or is it much more of a training advisory,
Mm-hmm.
whatever kind of program, right? So there's a distinction there, and you need to know which way are we going, right? Are they
Mm-hmm.
just going to keep asking you questions? Because if you keep asking me questions about something that I truly don't know,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to ever get anywhere.
Right.
Doesn't matter whether it's individual, small group, big
Mm-hmm.
group. I'm not ever going to get anywhere because I'm stuck.
Mm-hmm.
But there are times that I do know deep in my soul I have the answer. I just don't know quite how to get to it yet.
Right. You just haven't been asked the right question yet.
Right. Exactly. And so then you need to be thinking about how quickly do you want to get to the answer.
Mm-hmm.
The more personal and individual, you're going to always move faster than you are with a group program, right? I mean, it's natural, because back to every question will be directed specifically to you. Every answer will be specifically your answer,
Right.
right? So you aren't having to extrapolate from someone
Mhm.
else's answer, your answer, right?
Yep.
So that's the next piece, is the speed. And of course, individual is usually more expensive than group, right?
Mhm.
And so then there's how much money do you have to invest,
Mhm.
right? That's gonna make a decision as well. Also, do you like the group interaction and getting the insights from
Mhm.
other people? Some people really like that and can extrapolate well from that. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, Susie asked this question. They gave this answer. I've got a problem that's not that problem, but I can see how to take that
Mhm.
answer and apply it to my problem. That,
Yeah.
so that makes really great sense to be in a group, a group environment. And then back to how much access do you want to have? Then that's how big is the group environment,
Mhm.
right? I encourage people to always ask very specific questions. So, because people say it's small group. Well, how do you define small group?
Mhm.
Because I know people that define small group as 100 people. And I also know people who define small group as 30 people. And we define small group as 8 people.
Right.
So those are all very, very different. And
Mhm.
depending on how you envision the market, you may say, well, God, 100 people is never small group. But if you're used to working in rooms of thousands, then 100 actually
Mhm.
is a small group,
Yeah.
right? So don't make any assumption
Mhm.
on a definition that's not very, very clearly defined. Because if you're comfortable in a group of 100, great. But if you're really thinking small group and you're wanting 8, make sure that you're
Mhm.
getting in a group that's 8, not
Yeah.
100.
Okay, so we've talked about the appropriate problems that courses can solve. We talked about the appropriate problems that coaches can solve. What about direct service providers? Like, when do I just hire somebody to do the thing for me?
Well, and so we've, talked about this a lot on the podcast before, and I have great faith that we'll be talking more about this on the
Mhm.
podcast in the future. The thing about direct service providers is, do you need or want to be involved long term,
Mhm.
right? So, if you're hiring someone to do your social media, is that actually good or not, based on, do you need to be involved long term or not? Are
Mhm.
you offloading the pieces that make sense or not? If what you're selling is you and your personality, you probably still need to be somewhat involved in it,
Mhm.
right? Unless you're hiring a pretty high level person who really can do your voice well for you.
Mhm.
If you're paying $15 an hour, you are not getting that person. There's
Right.
there's no way, right?
Yeah.
And so, but it may be, no, I just need to have a presence there. It needs to kind of talk about what I'm doing. It's not that,
Mhm.
it's not that critical. I'm selling a product that is very well defined. I can just put the product. Great. Then you can absolutely hire a service provider for that. But back to, make sure you actually understand what you're hiring,
Mhm.
right? And this is kind of a different version of the coach question. What are you really, really hiring? Using, social media as an example. Are you hiring someone who just is going to make it pretty and get it
Mhm.
posted on a schedule? That's one level of person. But are you hiring someone to write in your voice, to take your thought leadership, to get it out there, to do it in a way that it feels really like you? And if at any point they go away, you start in and no one says, well, who are you?
Mhm.
Right? Well, that's a whole different level of person.
Yeah.
And knowing what you're hiring and making sure that they're capable of that really is where that piece, I think, plays in. And I think
Mhm.
that's where a lot of people feel like they get taken
Mhm.
is they say words and either people say, "Oh yeah, no, I can totally do that." And it's like,
Yeah.
"Really? You're 22 years old, you're not a native English speaker, and yet we think that you should be able to speak in my voice and write long form content that sounds like me?" Like, do all those pieces actually line up? Is it possible? Yes, it is possible. There's someone out there who can do
Mhm.
that. Is it likely? No, it is not likely.
Right.
Um, Being able to do that is a really high level skill
Yeah. And
and
we're
takes a
also
lot of time.
at like I feel it's important to insert the fact is your standard of excellence matters too.
Right.
I have worked with people where my standard of excellence, I've worked for people, I should say, as a service provider. My standard of excellence was about 5 steps above theirs.
Oh, yeah,
They
I
just
think
wanted
that's
it done, right?
yeah.
They didn't care. And I have worked for people whose standard of excellence was about 5 steps above the market rate for like what they were paying me,
Yeah.
right? And so you've got to get clear on that as well. Okay, so we've talked about the appropriate problems to be solved by courses, the appropriate problems to be solved by coaching, the appropriate problems to be solved by service providers, like hiring somebody to do it for you. I didn't mention consultants because consultants are this interesting space that people don't really know what they do. But do you want to just touch on that for a moment?
Yeah, I mean, consultants typically are working with much larger organizations,
Hmm.
typically, because they're a bit of a hybrid between a coach and a service provider.
Hmm.
They're working with you, but they usually have a solution, something that they're focused on, something that they have excellence in. Sometimes they will have multiple solutions, but it's still what I'm going to call a fixed number of
Hmm.
solutions. It could be someone who's installing a CRM system, just as an example,
Hmm.
right? And so they don't know all of them, but they know Zoho and they know, Salesforce and they know,
Hmm.
they may know two or three and they can help you figure out which is the right one and then help you get it implemented into your system the way that you need it to
Right.
be implemented for you. But typically consultants fall into the larger business
Yeah.
than
Well,
than who I think of as our listener.
right.
And that's why I call myself a business advisor, because I
Mm.
fall in between all three of those, between coach, consultant, and service provider.
Hmm.
Like, I don't actually do any service providing work. And I also don't call myself a consultant because I'm not actually delivering physical things,
Hmm.
right? But I am delivering ideas and advice that may not be able to be pulled out of you
Right.
because you may not actually know it exists as an
Yeah.
option, right? And so all of those are, a little bit different, but
Hmm.
in all cases, the same questions apply,
Hmm.
which is, do they have enough experience to actually get you to where they need? Are they more experienced than they need?
Hmm.
What, I mean, the kind of the coaching questions still apply both to the consultants. The coaching and the service provider questions both apply to the consultants and business advisor pieces as well.
Hmm.
Of, are you actually getting what you're needing, and are they narrow enough or are they broad enough
Hmm.
in their knowledge
Yeah.
to get you what you need, right? Because there is a piece where I've had folks say, "Oh, well, I just, I use my, fill in the blank." Could
Hmm.
be, I'm going to pick on accountants for the moment just because it's tax season while we're filming this.
Right.
and say, yeah, my accountant does my business advice for me. It's like, well, that's fine, but they're looking at everything through a financial lens.
Right.
They're not looking at it through the broader lens of human resources, technology, leadership, all of the other things. And can they give you great advice on the financials? Yes, absolutely, positively. But is that the correct advice for all of your business problems? Probably not.
Right. All right, Gwen. Well, thank you. Because I think what we've done now is we've laid out, it's not a framework, but we've laid out a process by which our listener can create their own path to success, right? Because the first step in the path is getting really clear on what problem you're trying to solve with the business advice you're seeking, right? Because we've already established all the costs that are associated with following bad business advice. So first, you want to get really clear on the problem that you're trying to solve. Second, you need to get clear on what is the ideal way you want that problem solved, right? Do you want to learn how to do it yourself? Do you want somebody else to just take it off your hands and you're perfectly okay having somebody else do it forever and being blissfully ignorant? Do you feel like there's some internal knowledge that you have that needs to be pulled out before you can move forward? Like that's important, figuring out how it is that you want your problem to be solved. And then, to your point, is figuring out what's the right timeline for solving that problem? What's the budget for solving that problem? Because we didn't say this, but I'm going to say this because it's fully in alignment with our show and everything that we stand for here, is everything should have a budget, right? Your budget for solving the problem should not be based on what people are willing to charge you. It should be based on what value do you place in getting that solution?
Well, and understanding that sometimes your budget and what you want don't align, and they're never going to align.
Yeah. But that's important information too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode. I want to thank you for listening and say that whether you are just starting out in business or you have been in business for years, it is really important to remember that your path to success doesn't have to look like anybody else's. And in fact, it likely won't. The key is finding strategies that align with your values, with your strengths, and your individual definition of success. And Gwen would throw in your business model as well. Now, if you're struggling to figure out what strategies actually make sense for your business, you really don't have to figure it out all alone. We have Insight to Impact, which is our premium weekly email subscription that helps you gain clarity on your business, one reflection at a time. Head over to everydayeffectiveness.com/impact to learn more. Thanks for tuning in to The Business You Really Want with Gwen Bortner. I'm Tonya Kubo, reminding you that sustainable success is within reach. Make sure to subscribe to the show and visit thebusinessyoureallyWant.com for more resources. Until next time, keep dreaming big and acting with intention.